Obviously, you don't know her very well.
Yeah, well, you get tired of the taste of tuna, you call me, all right?
Tonight we're going to take a little look at a gem from 2006 called Halloween Night, directed by Mark Atkins, who would later go on to do a bunch of shark movies for Sci-Fi Channel. It opens up with based on a true story, and this movie is so not based on a true story. But I think that's the little trick to when you finish a movie and it's kind of a piece of shit, you just go, well, you know, this is based on a true story. It gets the appeal up there. So enter, it's like a basement, and little Chris, he's probably, I don't know, 13 or 14 years old. He's hiding under a futon. He's pretty low to the ground. He's watching two masked gunmen who are gonna kill his parents, it seems like, and he just sits there and watches, and then finally one of them turns to his mom and shoots her, I don't know, like in the chest or something. It doesn't show, it just shows the blood running down his foot, or her foot, right next to Chris, who's like, and then his dad, seems like his dad is like somehow in on it, but meanwhile, Chris can see his dad perfectly, and he's just like staring at him, and they can't see him. He can see everything perfectly. So then he gets up and tries to make a run for it, and they still can't see him. But they take a final shot at Chris's mom, which goes right through his skull, but it hits the furnace right next to Chris, and it sprays a mist in his face and burns him up. And then we fast forward 10 years. Chris has been in an insane asylum. He's been locked up. And the guards like to go in with masks and mess with him. Pull little, I don't know. But one day they picked the wrong day, and he backhands the guard, and he's got, apparently if you get your face burned up, it gives you superhuman strength, because the blood flies out of the guard's face, and then he walks up and just pulls his throat out with his bare hand, and then he puts on the mask, puts on the coat, and sneaks out. You know, what is it about Halloween and lunatics escaping the mental institute and going back home? Next week we're gonna see another one. Can you guess who that might be? So elsewhere we go to David, a college-age kid who's setting up his house for a Halloween party he's having that night. Oh, and guess what? What a coincidence. It just happens to be Chris's old house. Not really that weird at all. He's putting up decorations, and then his friends show up early. Larry, Shannon, Janine, Kendall, Angela, and Tracy. His friend Todd's already there watching Girls Gone Wild. But they show up because they want to help. So then he goes upstairs and talks to Todd privately, because they got a little prank they got planned for later on in the night to try and scare everybody. So David leaves to go pick up his friend Daryl that he knew, that he went to school with, but none of the others know Daryl. Todd might, but the others don't. And he goes and picks him up, brings him back to the house, but he makes him stay in the basement. just kind of rude. You know, just hang out down in the basement for a couple hours till the party starts, and then he's gonna walk in like nobody knows him, because for the most part nobody does know him. Then Todd leaves, and I'm not sure, because I was thinking about it, because there's no reason why Todd and Janine need to leave. So maybe he was picking her up. I don't know if they left together. They're just in the car together and they're driving. And she looks in the back seat and she sees his costume, his executioner costumes in a box. And it's got a bunch of like medieval weapons, but they're real. They're not like fake plastic weapons. They're real medieval, well, they're not from the medieval times, but it's a medieval themed party. And so he's got these real weapons. And she's like, oh, don't hurt yourself tonight. And they get stopped at a police barricade, and the cop shows them a picture of Christopher. They're like, have you seen this guy? They're like, no. Todd says, no, but I'll never forget that face. And it's kind of funny they show him a picture, because like, you could just tell me that there's a burnt up dude running around. You know, it's not like, I'm going to confuse this guy with another burned up dude running around. Or should I stop him and say, hey, is your name Chris? No, I'm a different burned up guy. So eventually they get to leave. And they drive along, they realize they need gas. So they go to the gas station. Todd says, hey, can you fill it up? I'm gonna go in the bathroom and change into my costume. So she's like, at first she's like, I'm putting gas in your car. But he gave her money. But he goes in the bathroom and he realizes he's putting on his costume and realizes there's somebody else in there with him. And guess who it is? It's Christopher. Christopher comes walking out. He looks at him, and I don't know if he's like playing along because he's like, uh-oh, this is the guy that escaped. So he's like, oh, hey, nice makeup. Because like 10 minutes ago, he was just saying, I'll never forget that face. And now he's like, oh, who's this guy? But then he drops one of his weapons, and Christopher picks it up. It's like a knife, a big knife, and he just sticks it into Christopher's mouth, and it goes out the back of his head. And Todd dies. So Christopher puts on Todd's costume, which, you know, conceals his identity. Then he goes back out, and he's just kind of walking, and Janine whistles to him. So he's like, oh, this must be my ride. And then he gets in the car, he's starting to drive. And that's a bad thing. If you get locked up before the age of 16, you don't know how to drive a car when you escape. So he's like trying to figure it out. Plus he's got the mask on. And luckily she thinks, oh, you're driving like shit because you can't see. And she tries to get him to take the mask off, which of course he's not going to do that. So he starts driving, and then she's getting kind of worried because he won't say a word to her. So he takes a battle axe and just like guts her, which from that angle in a car, I don't think he could really do that. But he does, and she dies. So, but oh, before all that, Todd had called David and said, hey, there's a barricade because some guys escaped and blah, blah, blah. So, let's see. Larry gets on his laptop and Googles the escapee. And I guess he just looks up like current events and he finds out that it's Chris Vale. And he's escaped, and his mother was killed, and his dad shortly after committed suicide, and he's been in the nut house ever since. He doesn't find out that they're in the house that it all happened in, though. Somehow that part got left out. So David goes over to Shannon, because Shannon's his girlfriend, and he gives her this necklace that he found in the house. And it's not really clear if David lives there. It's like, I don't know why they're at this house, because it doesn't seem like he lives there, but it kind of alludes to they've had, you know, parties there before. Like every year they kind of get there, so I don't know if it's like a vacation house. But then Chris shows up finally, and shortly after he shows up, Daryl comes up, and the prank is on, and Daryl's just kind of just basically being a jackass, running around hitting on every girl in there, until finally Angela's like, what is this guy's problem? She goes up to David and she's like, who is that guy? Because he's like hitting on everybody and just bumming everybody out. Nobody likes him. And David's like, oh, I don't even know that guy. I didn't invite him. I don't know. I'll take care of it. So he goes over and tells Daryl, like, hey man, you got to get out of here. I didn't invite you. Then they get into kind of an altercation. They kind of wrestle around. This is their big prank. And Daryl pulls out a gun. And he's like, what? What now? And he's standing next to, he thinks it's Todd, but it's actually Chris, who's armed with a hatchet, and he like points, but Daryl points the gun at Todd, or at who he thinks is Todd, points it at Chris and says, you better drop your weapon. And it looks like, even though he's wearing a mask, it looks like Christopher's scared, and he throws his hatchet down, which is really funny because like he's crazy, but he's like, oh shit, a gun. Oh, a fake gun pointed at me. But then the cop shows up, but the cop is actually, he's in on the prank too. He's another guy that they don't know because David has done this elaborate, you know, plan. So the cop comes in, tries to see what's going on. He got a disturbance and all this. And so Daryl pulls his gun out on the cop, and the cop pulls his, but then he's like, give me your gun, man, give me your gun. So the cop's like, okay. And then he's like, give me your keys. And he takes Todd, Christopher, hostage. And so now they're alone in the car driving away from the house. And he doesn't realize he's in the car with the killer and he's driving along. Until after a while he's driving and he's like, all right, Todd, you've been really weird. So I don't know if he knows Todd or not. But he's like, you've been really weird. You haven't said a word. What's going on? And he pulls the car over. So Christopher / Todd chokes him out with a seatbelt and then drags him out of the car and runs him through with his sword, which I don't know why he had a sword on him the whole time. And then he leaves him there and he hops back in the car and drives back to the house. And he gets to the house and he goes down to the basement where there's a couple fucking. But he's nice enough to wait till they're finished and then he kills them. And then he just kind of sits down there. Okay, but during the whole altercation before the fake cops showed up, Larry had called the real cops because he was not in on the joke. So the real cops did show up, making it so David had no choice but to explain to Shannon that, hey, this is all a joke and blah, blah, blah. And she's kind of like, what? She gets pissed and she's like, fuck you. Part of it is she felt left out. Part of it she felt stupid. And whatever. But she leaves and then she storms down to the basement and she runs into Christopher, but she thinks he's Todd. But she soon finds out that he's not Todd and he knocks her out. So a little while later, David starts sensing something's up. And he starts finding bodies, like in the bathtub, he finds Tracy's dead. And Larry had gotten killed. I know it feels like I'm fast forwarding a lot, and I kind of am. So he goes into the room where the lesbians are and he warns them, but they're like, yeah, whatever. This is probably more of your joke. And he's like, no, this is for real. And so he's like, all right, whatever. So he leaves. He doesn't leave the house. He leaves the room and he goes to a drawer where there's a pistol and it's on the table that the laptop's on, and the laptop screen comes back up and he reads about Christopher Vale. And he's like, and he reads further and sees that Christopher Vale used to live there. So now he's thinking, okay, he escaped. He puts 2 and 2 together. He must be on his way here. That must be who's doing all this. And so then Chris leaves the basement, goes into the lesbian room, and starts. For some reason, they don't really think he's Todd. They realize immediately that he's trouble. And Angela just starts whooping his ass. She even gets full mount at one point, and somehow he gets his leg past her and kicks her in the head. And they both get up, and he grabs a hanger and sticks it through her eye and through her brain, and she dies. And then I'm sure he kills, I don't remember them showing it, but I'm sure he kills Kendall too. Then David goes to the basement where Shannon is cuffed to the bed, and he tries to save her, but then he gets knocked out from behind from Christopher. And so Shannon wakes up. She's still cuffed to the bed. She sees old Christopher, and Christopher sees the necklace. He has this little flashback where we actually go back to the night of the mother's murder that triggered the whole thing. And he remembers his father finding him, and his dad was going to kill him, but instead took his gun. I don't really know where the dad got the gun. He just had a gun for some reason. I mean, he didn't have it when the gunmen were there because he would have killed the gunmen unless he was in on it. I don't know. That part was not clear why gunmen were there. But instead of shooting Christopher, he shoots himself in the face and kills himself. Oh, but before that, he drags the mom's body into the closet and like spackles over it so that it looks like there was never a closet door or a closet or anything there. And Christopher ends up in a nut house later on. So now we come back to now, and Shannon gets the gun from it. Like, he dropped it because he was mesmerized by the flashback. So she picks it up and she shoots him like in his chest a couple times, and he slumps over. Maybe he's dead, maybe he's not. She goes outside, the paramedics are there, and it's daylight, and she's like looking around. She wants to know like what the body count is, who's alive, who's dead, who's not. There's a body bag that is assumed that Christopher is in. When she goes over and unzips it, it's not Christopher, it's the old switcheroo. It's David. Switch scenes, we see Christopher walking down the road, and he's wearing a paper plate tied to his head with a smiley face drawn but upside down, and he's walking, and a shirtless guy in a convertible stops by and like says, hey, you want to ride? And he's like, And he gets in. The end. That's it. So, I don't know. The flaw of this movie is none of the characters are very likable. Like, you don't care about any of them, and you're in this weird position where right off the bat you kind of feel for Chris. And you're meeting all these other people that you don't really like, but you have a reason to actually feel bad for Chris. You know, you're seeing all these people who are like, oh, we're the winners, and he's kind of like the guy that got the shit into the stick, and now it's his day for revenge. The only likable person is Shannon, but that's kind of like because of like 80s rom-coms where you're constantly feeling sorry for these girls that are with these asshole guys, and you're like, oh. Usually there's a guy in the movie though trying to steal her from the asshole, but he's the overlooked nerdy guy. He's the ducky. And so she's just with this guy, and at the end of the movie she leaves that guy. But in this case, she just left the guy because he's an asshole, and he got killed before she could really decide if she was gonna stay or go back or be single or whatever. So the badass award goes to Shannon because she thought she killed Christopher, and she dumped David's dumbass. So, what did we learn?
Lastly, don't go down in the basement.
If you like what you just saw, hit like and subscribe, or whatever you normally do when you enjoy a video. Also, click the links below to visit my Facebook page and the main website where you have access to hundreds of written reviews.